All right, it's time to break down the film one scene at a time. Act 1. Why don't we set some shit up?
All right, let's start having fun, gentlemen. Our story of a man who becomes convinced he's a vampire starts where you would expect, inside a therapist's office. Nick Cage is laying on the therapist's couch with his shoes on, presumably after walking around one of the filthiest cities in the world. So you know his character is already kind of a dick. And one thing that bothered me, I don't know if you guys picked up on this, but only one of the cushions was wrapped in plastic. Did you guys notice that?
Right by his feet. Yeah. I'm assuming that was because he was wearing shoes on the couch.
Yeah,
probably a rental of some sort, right?
Yeah, it's probably a rental couch, and Nick Cage didn't want to take his shoes off, and they were like, well, we can't ruin the couch.
I mean, to be fair, Peter Lowe would not take his shoes off.
Yeah.
I think in real life.
I could see that argument being made. I could see that argument between Nick Cage and the director, day of shooting.
Yeah. Or that big argument between the therapist lady and Peter Lowe.
Yeah.
No, I'm not going to take off my shoes.
I thought she's all right, she knows that he's a dick, so she's just gonna take precautions to protect her couch, but it kept bothering me the whole damn time.
Yeah.
I don't know why. In the scene, he's discussing his most recent one-night stand. Well, she kind of nods out like she's on drugs, which I thought is not a very good sign of a therapist. She's not very engaged.
She is the worst freaking therapist.
I think at one point she even checks her watch, like while he's talking.
She's so disengaged with him. She's like, anyways, it's time. Well, it's almost time for you to go, Peter. Suddenly we cut to Stanley Hudson's favorite nightclub. Seriously, watch that scene, guys. They cut to a young doppelganger of Leslie David Barker from The Office, like 3 different times.
Yes, I did notice it, and I even was like, "Is that really like?
I looked
were they trying to make a joke in The Office that was actually what Stanley was doing back in the 80s, and that's why he, cheats on his wife and runs away to Florida or whatever? Like he's trying to relive the nightlife."
One of the writers saw Vampire's Kiss. Dude, you were in that movie.
Dude, you were in the movie.
And they do. They keep cutting back to him like he's a character you're supposed to focus on. I thought he was going to be a character in the movie.
3 to 5 times, like cutting straight to him.
I thought the same thing. I was like, okay, well, he's going to show up again. Nope, never shows up.
Nope, gone.
So here we see Nick is chatting up a cutie at the bar who falls for his wily charms, and they drunkenly make their way out into the night where Nick's girl yells for a taxi. While given an impromptu Shakespearean monologue, Nick is rudely interrupted by an impatient taxi driver who calls him a cocksucker after he tells the taxi guy to be gone.
He says, "You cocksucker, fuck your own mind."
Is that what he said?
Yeah. So this is where I'm going to interject because I had subtitles on because they walk out of the bar drunkenly chatting, and they're like, and Nick Cage or Peter is saying something like he could stretch himself out, he could stretch out to Ethiopia if he wanted to, and she's like, no, what? And they're trying to come up with a character, and he goes, he's the 4th member of the Fantastic Four, the last member of the Fantastic Four. So they're talking about Mr. Fantastic for some reason, and she says, no, we already said him. So they're having some conversation about comic characters or characters with superpowers it's never resolved, but that's what they were talking about.
I couldn't make heads or tails of what the hell that conversation was. Like,
and even with subtitles on, you're still like, what? Like this again, Nick Cage is really into comics, so I feel like this is just, they were like, just improv. Just chat about something, something you care about, you're really passionate about, and that's what came about from that, is they were joking about superheroes or something.
Nick Cage would make a really good Mr. Fantastic.
Oh my God!
Definitely see him as Mr. Fantastic.
I could see that too. I think he would kill it too because he loves comics so much.
You didn't have to wait for the payoff. You didn't have to wait that long for the payoff for the Fantastic Four comment. That's what they were talking about.
That was a good tease.
Yeah, that was good.
Teased that up real good.
But also, I thought it was great that the guy goes, "Great cocksucker, fuck your mind," and he drives off.
Maybe he was responsible for fucking his mind up because he seemed perfectly normal till that point.
Wow, maybe it is a super deep-seated foreshadowing. Or it was just an immigrant who didn't know English all that well. They meant to say like, "Fuck you."
Now we're back at Nick's place. He and his girl continue a completely incoherent conversation that even after 3 viewings still doesn't make a lick of sense. Up until Nick's girl asks him what he does for a living, and he answers, literature. As a little boy watches for no reason at all. He's just creepily watching him from the next flight of stairs.
Yeah, here they were talking about like the brownstone that he was going into. I think, like, I don't know. He's like, they were talking about the color of something, and he's like, it's brown, like the rocks are brown, and she's like, that's a brownstone. It's a different thing because they're going into a brownstone building or something. But it still is a completely incoherent conversation. And it's like,
which I felt like he nailed being drunk. Like that was perfect. Like when you see, it's like those late nights back in your early 20s when you're just hammered with your friends and you're just having nonsense conversations like that. That whole scene was perfect. They're just hammered. Then it gets weird. Then it gets
it's weird how he can play a guy under the influence so well. It's in different movies. Yeah.
It's true.
A lot of practice, maybe.
Well, he has admitted that he would do scenes intoxicated, like drunk.
Yeah.
Not surprising.
So,
he's definitely like
method
a
acting, you know?
method actor.
So now they start getting into it hot and heavy. They're making out, ripping off each other's clothes while playing chess. I mean, they're getting some really dirty stuff here. Right in the middle of kissing titties, a bat flies into the apartment like an asshole and totally ruins the vibe.
Fat bat.
Nick tells this, oh my God, he's cock blocking.
Something about that scene when it's like a long take when they come into the apartment and they're kissing and ripping off clothes and playing chess and stuff. It's all seen like through the window, like you're looking down through his window into it. So are we supposed to be the bat in this point of view? Like we're looking in, watching this and picking the moment to jump in. I just now realized it because I realized that the shot was really weird when they filmed it because it's like, are we supposed to be like a peeping Tom, like looking in the window? I just now realized we were probably the bat.
Yeah.
The bat's perspective.
Yeah, after watching it again, I figured it was from the bat's perspective because that bat eventually becomes his vampire girlfriend. And well, that's how I interpreted it.
Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense.
So Nick tells this goofy-looking bat with the flight speed of an airborne turtle to shoo, shoo, while his girl slumps half-naked in the hall, much to that creepy little boy's surprise and enjoyment. And for some reason, he just seems to be living in the stairwells there. Nick heroically battles the bat until he concedes by giving the bat the old "follow me, lover boy" hair flip.
Did you notice that, like... This kind of like a sexy look back at the bat.
It was
foreshadowing.
It's like he and his lady friend stumble out of the apartment building and hail a cab while Nick laughs like a robot. Who just activated his humor chip 2 minutes earlier, and the two of them drive off into the night for some off-screen lovemaking.
One little thing I wanted to add about that bat is it was actually made by one of the guys who worked on Empire Strikes Back, which is kind of amazing. And they shipped it from England over, and it was completely destroyed in the mail. So they had to like put it back together, and I feel like that's
why it looks
part
all
of the
janky.
reason why it looks so shitty.
It looked like a bloated bat.
Yeah.
I was like, dude, this bat needs to go.
It is just sort of like, it's so slow. It's just like going around the room like, you ever seen a bat? They're not.
They go like this.
Slow.
Right?
Like, just do this. Don't shake it too hard. It'll fall apart.
Quick aside, my in-laws just sent us a picture this morning of a bat that was sleeping outside their window in their bedroom, like this morning. They took pictures of it.
Did they get turned on by it?
I made that comment to my wife, but I didn't ask.
Tell her to keep an eye on them. Make sure they don't start sliding into this delusion of becoming vampires. I saw a documentary about it once. Next, we see Nick at his literary job, where we find out his name is Peter Lowe, and we get to meet his lovely assistant Alva.
Poor Alva.
Peter explains, yeah, poor Alva. Peter explains to Alva that a client named Frank Heatherton wants a copy of the contract from a sale of a short story named Rattlesnake Hills. He goes on to say that the agency acquired the story in the 60s, but there's no reason why the contract shouldn't be somewhere in the company's files. He then tasks this poor woman to track down the missing contract, which is likely buried in a massive, unsorted file somewhere in the recesses of this building. I feel so bad for that character.
Yeah.
And
at first, so much really fun watching him torture her at the same time. It's like
it is.
Like you feel bad for her.
At first, I thought she was gonna be. At first, I thought she was gonna be a no-name character that just kind of comes in and he gives her this task and then she kind of disappears. I was pleasantly surprised to see the journey that she goes on.
She's kind of the only person who gets what the hell's going on. Everybody else is kind of like, he's so eccentric and
stuff like that. That one lady's like, he's so eccentric as he throws her fucking thing in the trash. I'm like, that's an asshole. But it's the late 80s, everybody's okay with that.
Yeah.
Next, we see Peter return to his bat-infested apartment where he is sad to see that the fake bat has flown the coop. We cut to Peter back in his therapist's office, telling her that he got horny while he was fighting the bat. And I got to be honest, I mean, who wouldn't? who doesn't get turned on when they're fighting a bloated bat that moves at the speed of a turtle?
I feel like that was like the first major sign of the therapist just being terrible at her job. It's like, he just said that he got turned on by a bat.
And she was like, you were having foreplay with this other chick, so maybe you're still turned on from that. And I think he explicitly was like, no, it was because of the bat.
That scene was awkward because she's asking him she's trying to ask him clarifying questions, and he's like so focused on how horny he was fighting that bat, and then it's just like that awkward exchange back and forth between them, and I'm like, you're just okay with your client telling you that he's turned on by a bat? Like, I'd be asking some other questions here, maybe giving him some medication, but I don't know. I didn't spend all that time in psychiatric school like her. So
medication could have saved us a lot of dead random animals and cokehead.
But I'm glad it didn't. She has a hard time wrapping her head around this, as you might expect. But before she can press Peter further about his attraction to the rotund furry friend, he's shooed away. Peter bails, leaving the doctor to shoot. Peter bails, leaving the doctor to shake her head and suck her pen, which was kind of disgusting. Maybe I'm just scarred from Corona, but I wouldn't be doing that. Back at the literary office, Peter flips out when Alva says she still hasn't found the files. Next, we see Peter checking himself out in the mirror like a man who knows goddamn well how fucking amazing he looks and heads out to hang with some buddies, but quickly gets bored and tries to find the next Mrs. Lowe instead. As luck has it, he immediately spots the girl from Flashdance and lays on the charm, which must have worked because next thing we see, Peter and Rachel going at it back in Peter's Batcave. In the throes of passion, Rachel twists Peter's head and reveals that she is, in fact, a vampire.
You know, if you didn't know what the hell this movie was about, that would be such a weird, like, what? Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If you went in completely blind, you're like, oh, that's a cute name, Vampire's Kiss. And then all of a sudden, she's just chowing down on his neck. You'd be like, what the fuck am I watching? Which might explain why this movie didn't do too hot in the box office.
Yeah.
So she starts chowing down on Peter's neck for a second, and it turns out he's super into it. She explains that Peter chose her, which leads us to believe that she and the bat from earlier are possibly one and the same.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if it was Peter like confirmed at any point that he put those two people together, or the bat and this girl, which we do find out the identity of her at some point.
Yeah, I just assumed that it was like she was the bat, and now here she is, and this is how. Because at this time, it's still ambiguous. Is he starting to slide into some serious mental issues, or is this going to be a true vampire story?
Right. Yeah. I'm not jacking off.
Next, we see Peter.
I'm just doing my steps here.
Just tubing. Tubing on camera.
Now we'll take a quick break for our OnlyFans.
I just want to Oh, this is my favorite time of the week, and I want to make sure I enjoy it to the best of my abilities.
Best reason to have a Fitbit is to fake it out, so you don't have to actually do the exercise.
Well, you want me to get up every hour
keep
and walk
reading about her
around
sucking his neck
during our show? Okay.
The fans might like it. So, next we see Peter shaving with no sign of the bite from the night before, but he cuts himself shaving in the exact same spot where she bit him, causing him to cover the cut with a Band-Aid for the rest of the film.
I missed that part when I watched it.
Going on.
I didn't. I saw him shaving, but I missed that he cut himself.
Yeah, cuts himself, and then that's why, because like he didn't have anything there. Yeah. So that's like the first sign that she wasn't actually real,
right?
And the first real concrete sign that this dude is in fact insane.
Yeah.
Yes. Because as you will see, we learn real quick. Yeah, he's just got mental issues. An exuberant Peter then signs some...
Sings some
Stravinsky. Is that how you say it?
Stravinsky.
Yeah. Stravinsky.
An
exuberant Peter then sings some Stravinsky and puts together coffee in bed for Rachel, but there is a catch. There is no one in the bed. Dun, dun, dun. And Peter hands the coffee to a phantom person that only he sees. Yeah. Quick fact. It cost them $10,000 in production to license that song.
Yeah, so
that is crazy.
Oh my God.
So it was easily the most expensive part of the post-production process, and it was because he sang it so well. Like even the director in the commentary was like, if he just would have not gotten so close to the original, like the actual sound of the song, we wouldn't have had to pay for it. But
wow,
Nick Cage was under the impression that this song was in the public domain because it's a Stravinsky song, you would think.
Yeah, it's a classical music, right?
Stravinsky's family has held the rights, and they still hold the rights, and they still go after people constantly for the rights to his songs and stuff. So yeah, $10,000 just to license that song for that 2-second little.
That's crazy for 2 seconds.
I don't even remember that scene. So.
Yeah. When he's making the coffee and he's like,
I remember the coffee part, but I don't remember him singing. I mean, yeah, I guess it was just he's singing. It didn't even register.
After Peter shakily shares coffee with his bed sheets, we see him and the girl he picked up in the first scene of the movie at an art gallery, or possibly an alleyway where homeless people smear blood and shit on the walls, but we really can't be sure.
It's modern art.
It's beautiful.
It's modern art.
You can't critique it like that.
It's modern sharp.
It just looked like a big shit smear on the wall.
It did.
When I was watching this, I didn't blame him when he ditched. I didn't realize it was a different. I didn't realize it was the same chick from the start of the movie. I thought it was a different chick, so I was like, he definitely has a type. Yeah, he takes that random.
Yeah, I thought it was the same thing. I was like, dang, he really's got a type here.
It was actually entirely by accident that they ended up picking Jennifer Beals for that. They had so many other actresses in mind, but she was the one who actually was available. So it wasn't intended to be somebody like Patricia Arquette or whatever.
Yeah. I like it though because it does kind of like blur that line as you start to realize he's losing his mind.
Right.
Is she even real? Because they look. They look so similar, and it's you don't get to spend a lot of time with that first woman at all. I mean, it's very quick, and then she's pretty much gone after the first act. And so I like that it kind of blurred that line of like, well, is she actually real, or did he really experience that, or was he having a delusion at that first encounter with her and the bat?
Yeah, especially given what happens at the end of the movie. But that's too far.
Yeah.
We'll get to it.
That's a good tease. Peter is understandably disgusted by the feces on the wall and ditches his girl by using the excuse that he needs to take a piss. He heads home, leaving his girl to wonder where the hell this bat-loving lunatic went for 20 minutes before she gives him a call and rightfully breaks up with him. She calls him a fuck and ditches his non-homeless feces art-loving ass.
It was a beautiful gallery. I don't know.
Peter delivers Nick Cage's favorite line read of the film.
Yeah, well, fuck you too, sister.
I love that.
I couldn't do it justice.
That's his favorite line read out of the movie?
That's his favorite one, yeah. He got a pretty good chuckle out of that in the commentary. And he even he stopped the other guy, the director, from talking. He was like, "Oh wait, this is my favorite one." And then he did the line read, and then he laughed at him.
That's awesome. I was so sad I couldn't get it on DVD because I wanted to listen to the commentary.
It's a hard one to get on DVD for whatever reason. I think it's completely out of print now. I feel like it enhanced the experience a little bit by being able to hear that commentary.
Yeah. Back at the therapist's office, Peter explains away the awkward boner he got from the bat and chalks up his feelings to being pretty horny, pretty heat up, and drunk. Plus, he was horny. I love that he doubled back on the horny part.
Plus, I was
pretty horny.
He's very vociferous, right? He knows how to express himself in multiple ways because he's such a literary genius.
Yeah. I mean, he doesn't write any of the New York Times best-selling novels, but he helps usher those authors onto fame.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
by finding
for the most part, he seems to scream at his assistant, and I think that's all he really does at that job.
Yeah.
Yeah, he admits that he's kind of a douchebag to all of his assistants.
Also, you find out he's also got a boss. So, what is?
Yeah,
he's not top dog at the thing. He's just some middle manager who's got his own office.
Yeah.
20-something who went to some high prestigious school, just like Patrick Bateman in American Psycho.
That's all his therapist needed to know to move on from that topic, and it never gets brought up again. She's a real bang-up therapist who really seems to be helping Peter work through his issues as well as his ever-slipping grasp of reality.
She really, really sucks at her job, which we'll see.
Not good.
We will see more of.
I was gonna say, later on down the road, there's a lot of questions. I had a lot of questions about her professionalism.
My brief answer to that is that she doesn't exist.
You don't think so?
But we'll talk about it later when we get more into it.
Okay. Interesting. Okay.
That is possible, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is actually
another
possible.
tease.
Back at the office, Peter has a spastastic fit.
Peter, Frank Heatherton on 03.
When he finds out the client looking for the missing contract is on the phone and promptly calls Alva into his office.
He does this
Peter again freaks out.
Mouth thing. He said on the commentary that he didn't even know what he was doing. He just thought he would have a tick.
Yeah, it
or
looks
something.
like his jaw unhinged or pop, he dislocated his jaw and he's trying to pop it back into place. Just to describe that to the audio listeners of what this looks like.
Peter again freaks out on Alva as he explains that he's about to talk to Frank Heatherton, and Frank is going to be pissed about not getting the contract that she has yet to find. Peter tells Alva to listen to the song and dance he has to do with the client because she hasn't done her job. Frank Heatherton quickly tells Peter, who glares at Alva the whole conversation, that there is absolutely no rush in getting him that contract. He tells Alva, who could only hear his side of the conversation, that he couldn't get a word in edgewise, that Frank is boiling mad, and that if he doesn't get the contract within a week, he'll terminate his agreement with the agency. He then asks,
"Am I getting through to you, Alva?"
And she immediately gets back to work.
Am I getting through to you, Alva? So good.
Just his over-the-top acting in this case fits the character so well as the movie goes on.
Yeah.
that the second watch, I sat there and really appreciated it because it's an odd way to foreshadow what is going to be happening pretty soon.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of people take his little moments out of context. And when you watch the movie all together, it makes a hell of a lot more sense.
Peter heads to a diner full of people who can't act, including the screenwriter of the film, who you mentioned earlier was playing the waiter, the producers who were behind his table,
Oh, was that the two women talking behind the table?
Yeah, I think only one of them is actually a producer, but yeah, they were on the table behind him. I think the girl who actually like mentions that she got engaged, which causes him to flip out. Which, if you really track it, every time anybody falls in love or seems happy with whoever they're with, he freaks out because he can't find that for himself.
Peter can't believe he has been waiting to have someone take his order for 15 minutes and cause the place a fucking grease hole when the woman behind him says she's been proposed to.
Fucking grease hole.
I had to put the subtitles on for that one too, because
he says it's so weird.
He says it's so strange.
He heads out but feels a sharp pain in his neck, then has another one of his signature spastic mouth fits before bolting to a building that is infested with creepy mime street performers that even Peter is weirded out by.
That was so weird.
Peter tries to call.
That was like, I thought it was like, maybe this is one of his delusions, but
yeah,
no,
when I think back on it, I think it was still, because if you watch, they're pantomiming a scene where he tries to kiss her and then she slaps him and he spits on her, and then they do the same thing as he leaves the room, and like that's his mind. That's how relationships work. Like he tries to kiss some chick, she gets mad at him, smacks him, and then he retaliates. The man retaliates back. That's kind of how I interpreted it, because otherwise it's two mimes practicing on a sidewalk in the middle of the night in New York, and it makes no fucking sense.
The director actually said that it was just like, I've seen this all the time on the street, so I decided to add street performers. But like, I feel like if you take away his like commentary on some of this stuff, the commentary was recorded 10 years after they made the movie, and the writer wasn't involved in that. So I feel like a lot of the little things that maybe we're adding to it were supposed to be like what we're saying they are. I don't know.
Well, it's like one of the things I like about the movie is because he's an unreliable narrator, you question the entire movie. So you can discuss anything. Yeah. Anything can exist or it can't exist or whatnot. It's one of the things I really like about it. And I felt like that was because I was like, that's really fucking weird. Like, that's weird in a movie full of weird things. But that would be a plausible explanation for it that sort of fits in the way that the movie works. But otherwise, it's just weird for weird's sake.
I thought it was funny that even he was like, the fuck is going on?
The look on his face as he's stumbling up the stairs. I was like, oh yeah, he even thinks this is fucked up.
Also, I was unclear, like, what is that building that he went into? Was that just some random building? Because it wasn't his apartment.
I thought it was his apartment, but yeah, he just went into a random building to use the payphone because he had to call. He was trying to call his therapist, or and then also
he tries to call her, and of course she's out.
I figured it was just an apartment building because you see a couple coming out.
Yeah, he just goes into the lobby and uses the phone and then leaves.
Yeah. Robert Bierman was trying to set up something in that he talked about it kind of looking like it might be a brothel of some sort. Like there's Johns with girls going in and out.
And there's a guy, there's a doorman sitting there.
Yeah.
Like there's a guy sitting in a chair for seemingly no reason. Yeah. Maybe he's the sort of bouncer or whatever the guy. Yeah, that would make sense.
And then the chick coming out kind of looked a little whorish, but once again, it's late 80s nightlife. It was ambiguous. Peter tries to call his incredible therapist, who of course isn't in. So instead, he calls that poor girl he ditched at the art gallery. He explains that he left because of an illness and asks if they can meet up later, which she reluctantly agrees to.
Why? I don't get it.
It was kind of an illness, mental illness.
I mean, he wasn't lying. Peter gets interrupted while getting dressed for the date by a knock at the door. When he inspects the noise, he finds no one outside his door. He locks it and slowly backs away while shaking his head like a toddler who just accidentally spilled water on a computer and knows he's about to get punished. He sits down, wipes his head, checks his watch, and bangs his fist on the chair before getting up and going out the door he just backed away from.
There's a quick thing in there when he's getting dressed, he goes to pull the Band-Aid off his deck, and you can see there's nothing there, and he puts it back really quickly. So it's another one of those hints that, like, even though maybe he even cut himself, like, it's already healed because it's been a couple of days. He doesn't need to keep the Band-Aid on it. It's not an actual bite mark.
I didn't notice that it had healed already.
Yeah, he's putting his collar up, and he goes to pull the Band-Aid off, and you can see a brief shot of it in the mirror. Nothing there, and then he puts it back on. And puts the collar up.
See, he's always make the movie better, I feel like when we sit down and, because we all kind of notice different things. I think that's kind of the beauty of this show is, like, we're really, really, really diving into these movies.
To me, that was the first time I didn't, like, the coffee thing didn't get me for some reason. Like, when he was handing the coffee to nobody, I thought he was just being a fucking weirdo. But that was, to me, that was the first thing I've heard, the first concrete shot in the movie that says, like, no, there's nothing, he didn't actually get bitten by a vampire. He's making it all up. It's all in his head.
Before he can leave the building for his date with Jackie, a.k.a., yeah, well, fuck you too, sister, he hears the voice of Rachel, his vampire mistress. He heads back upstairs with her while sporting a "I pooped my pants, mommy" look on his face, with his mouth wide open. When I read that, I knew, dude, all I could see is that look on his face as they're headed back up the fucking stairs. So it fits so perfectly.
That was actually, Nick Cage took that from if you remember the original Dracula, when he's being pulled up the stairs, he has that exact same look on his face, like, this weird, like, mouth agape, stupid stare on his face.
Yeah, the vampires hypnotize you, and you're under their spell.
Yeah, he just makes it look so comical. So, as you might imagine, Jackie is pissed that he ditched her again, and writes him a note while he and Rachel relive the biting scene from earlier, complete with the same clothes and the same pasties on Rachel's breast. Now, that, I was like, no way. I had to rewind and watch the first scene again. And I was like, no, they're wearing the exact, with her, it's like, okay, whatever. With him, I was like, exact same freaking
I was trying to remember if it was the same shot, like if they just recycled.
It was pretty much the same shot.
It was, if it wasn't the same shot, it had to be a take done at the same time, because it was like almost perfect, same angle, same movements by her. And then, of course, the largest pasty on planet Earth. I mean, there was more pasty than there was flesh.
Yeah. Which, now that you mentioned,
her entire body.
She didn't like Nick Cage and he didn't like her, and he wanted it to be his girlfriend. That makes total sense why they did that. And I remember I pointed out as I watched it, I was like, this is obviously the actress has a non-nudity clause for this movie and didn't want to do this, and they had to compromise and put pasties on her. Because my wife was the one that pointed it out. She's like, oh, nice pasties. And I was like, well, I mean, be honest, would you rather show your tits on screen? This is my real wife who actually exists. I was like, would you rather show your tits on screen or suck on Nicolas Cage's neck and put your bare breasts against him? And she's like, I'd rather just show them on screen so I can, I kind of get what she's going for.
It's funny though, it's like the first girl, she shows her breasts. Yeah. But then Jennifer Beals, who's like a major star at that point, she was a big star.
That was probably why then. She didn't had it in her claws and didn't want to do it.
I get it.
They could have.
But did the pasty have to be that large?
They were so big that they were glaringly obvious. You could have shot around it or changed the angle so you didn't have to see it.
Sure, it was like, nobody will ever watch this in high definition or something.
Right. Yeah. I mean, honestly, that's one of the only complaints I have is that just pulled you right out of the scene. And there's no way to not, I mean, it's just, it didn't have to be, the pasties didn't have to be that big.
Yeah.
Or they could have, like you said, shot around it, or maybe darkened the room a little more. But that, I was like, because most people, if you're watching it in the theater, you see that scene again and you're like, oh, whatever. But now, like, we can go back and watch it.
We can watch it anytime we want.
Took the same, you took the same scene from before and just reused it.
I thought it
Which seems to be a theme in his movies, apparently.
Like a mistake of some sort, that they just didn't think about it, but it was actually intentional. That this was the exact same delusion again from Peter Lowe. So he literally just relived the passionate night he had with the vampire in his head. Again, exactly the same way as it was. Same clothes, everything. Same pasties, everything.
Yeah. I felt the same way. I'm glad that it was deliberate because I thought that. I was like, I want to give him credit here and say that was on purpose, that they recycled
it
the same.
Yeah, it was intentional.
Yeah. See, down the road, once you find out, like, okay, this is just he's just delusional. I was like, now that scene makes sense.
Yeah.
The pasty, not so much. I mean, maybe he was just because he was really in love with her. He was trying to keep her modest. Maybe that was why.
I feel like that's one of the amazing things about this movie is it's just every time you watch it, it kind of gets deeper and it gets more intricate in his delusion, and you start noticing little things. And like, I think a lot of people probably watched this movie once and was like, that was a stupid, weird movie.
Yeah.
But like, the more you watch it, the more intricate and amazing it becomes.
First watch, I thought, wow, this is not a very deep film. And then the second viewing, I was like, well, no, like, this is like I started appreciating more through the first viewing. The second viewing, I was like, what? Okay, I completely understand where they were going with this film. And a lot of this stuff makes more sense now that I know how the story unravels.
Yeah.
And I think I feel like a lot of people should give it a second viewing if they've only seen it once.
Definitely, yeah.
Which again, you know, in the 80s when it came out, you really got to go back to the theater to watch Vampires Kiss a second time.
I mean,
You're probably just going to watch it once.
You could do home video back then. They had
You could,
VHS.
but it was like, is somebody really going to buy Vampires Kiss on VHS after a lukewarm reception at the box office?
You know, that's what happened. Was it ended up becoming a cult classic? You know, because of being able to rent it at the video store. Probably because they're like, Nicolas Cage is in this, Jennifer Beals is in this. This has got to be good. And then they watch it and like, whoa, what the hell was this movie?
Yeah, it's just funny because like the movie landscape's changed so much from when these things were made that it's like you got to think about the logistics of things like that versus now. Yeah, it'll show up on Netflix and anybody can watch it and be like, hey, this movie's actually really good. But you think back to the time, like you're going to waste your time and effort going to see it in the theater, and then maybe word of mouth will get out a year down the road when it comes out on home video for $30 or whatever VHS tapes cost back then.
Yeah.
And, you know, but it probably because of movie rentals or cheap syndication, you know, movie channels getting it to play it on TV because whatever, that's probably how it grew.
Yeah, that was how I saw it the first time was, I think, Cinemax.
Act 2, The Conflict.
So, Act 2 starts with Peter staring at an empty desk, and he calls out for Alva, softly at first, until he's screaming her name at the top of his lungs in their office. So he's not by, there's people around him, and he's just like, Alva! Alva! Alva obviously hears him but doesn't respond, and neither does anybody else in the office. He was screaming, which pisses Peter off. So he does what any good boss would do. He runs out of the office, does an impressive leap onto a nearby desk, points at her, and yells, "There you are!" And again, nobody else reacts to it in any way, shape, or form. I don't know if anybody even looks up.
Not really. They just kind of look at each other a little confused.
Alva is understandably freaked out by Peter's increasingly erratic behavior, so she bolts out of the room clutching her purse. Peter gives chase while the whole office just looks around at each other in mild confusion. And this is where I think the movie just starts to completely swing into like dark comedy. Like this is such an absurd scene. Like your boss is chasing somebody through the office and nobody else is reacting. He chases her into the bathroom, the ladies' room, where his presence startles an old lady who asks, "What the hell's going on here?" And then just kind of leaves, even after hearing an obviously terrified Alva say that she has a gun, but not before expertly delivering the line,
"What the fuck is going on?" I don't know. I mean,
while staring directly into the camera on their way out. She just,
"What the fuck is going on?"
looks up and walks right past the
like staring directly into the camera the whole way out of the bathroom.
Maybe she's an audience insert or something.
I remember the director saying that she was a lot of fun. She was a lot of fun to work with. And she was obviously only there for like 1 day or something. But.
Yeah. But you just think about it logically, like a guy, even if you know who, maybe she does work for him, so your boss chases somebody into the bathroom, clutching her purse and yelling for help.
Yeah.
And you just walk out.
Just, I'll leave this man in the bathroom
see how this plays out.
Poor woman who's terrified.
I honestly thought maybe that woman was just a random person that happened to be in the bathroom. And that's why she's looking at the camera. She walks out. And the director's like, "Oh, well, fuck, we got to keep her in the movie now. We can't afford to reshoot this. We spent $10,000 on the song."
I just wonder, like, did they notice that she was staring into the camera when she was walking out?
don't know.
Was
Like,
that
it's such a
intentional?
weird.
I don't know.
There's a couple of moments like that in the pasties when there's just like your continuity's broken and you don't do anything to fix it. You don't reshoot. You don't do a retake.
You got to remember, this was this guy's first ever directing.
Maybe it wasn't noticed until they were doing the dailies and they didn't have the actress anymore to reshoot it or anything, and they had to keep moving.
Yeah.
Peter seems to have a slight moment of clarity when he realizes he's scared that his employee's so bad that she's threatening to shoot him. So he sincerely apologizes to Alva and makes his way out. I think that was like maybe his last... The last glimpse you get of him as a human being, like a normal person, for the rest of the movie.
Yeah. It was like the last genuine moment out of Peter Lowe.
Yeah, like he's crossed a line at this point, figuratively and literally, crossed into the women's bedroom where there's no going back. Back at her desk, Alva fights off a panic attack while she continues hunting for the elusive missing contract. And she has this stack on her desk. It's like a half foot that says the Weatherton contracts or whatever and stuff. So like she's just
Der Spiel or something like that. It was like a magazine.
Der Spiegel.
Der Spiegel. Yeah.
And I thought at that point, oh, she found it. Like, and then from that point on, I thought that she had just been intentionally withholding it from Peter because he's an asshole. But it turns out that's just the stack of contracts and she has to go through all of them.
Yeah.
And there's
apparently weren't put away properly. They weren't put in alphabetical order, which we'll find out.
Well, who wouldn't have done that?
Yeah.
Who?
Exactly.
Who? I want to know who.
Thankfully, while Alpha's having this panic attack, the old lady from the bathroom is there to comfort her for like half a second before she gets back to old lady stuff. I can't even remember. She says the equivalent of like, there, pats her on the shoulder, and then just walks off. Like, it's okay, your boss just tried to assault you in the bathroom or something. It happens, Mondays.
We all go through some crap, We're women in the corporate world, so...
Yeah, and that may have been directly intentional, like intended in that manner. Like, what are you going to do?
I mean, she grew up in like the Mad Men era,
right?
Of being in offices where that behavior, that's just a Tuesday afternoon.
Yeah,
that's nothing. That's just normal.
Of course, the boss is drunk in the middle of the day, running after people.
And he's gonna find the youngest, least most vulnerable, most eligible female employee and harass the shit out of her. It happens. It's a rite of passage.
Yeah,
exactly.
One thing I wanted to bring up is I think that his like obsession with Alva kind of came from like that first moment when he like checks out her legs for a second. Which I think we went through that scene already.
I don't think we talked about it, but he does when she first walks out. He looks at her.
He like checks her out and like he thinks like, well, this girl obviously would never want to be with me, so I'm going to make her life fucking miserable hell because she represents everything I want out of life, but I can't get it.
She'd reject him. He knows it. So the whole like sexism in the workplace, I think this like it was intentional because the very next shot is Peter in a conference room with a bunch of male coworkers, and it's like very, very old boys club. Like he's in a room with discount Chris Farley, dollar store Harold Ramis, and a couple other jaunty fellows laughing it up about Peter's shenanigans in the women's restroom. Peter laughs uncontrollably throughout the entire scene like a maniac. He clearly is. And at one point he closes the blinds because, well, vampire. He laughs so weirdly, like in such a bizarre way that I honestly couldn't tell if it's meant to be Peter the character fake laughing or Nick Cage the actor like way overhamming what's supposed to be a real laugh from Peter the character.
In the commentary he said that he was playing up him overcompensating, like him trying to cover up for what he did by just kind of joking around with them and like laughing hysterically about what happened so that nobody will like get mad at him and
but none of them are mad anyway. They're just like
they're all like surprised you didn't rape her.
The douchey dudes talk about how ludicrous it is that poor Alva would ask for a raise after being chased into the ladies' room by her nutcase boss, and what kind of graffiti there is on the stalls. Fun stuff like that. Yeah. His boss is like, hey, when you're in there, did you see my name written on the walls? And what did they say? And that's where he like does this super over the top like That's the other thing. I was like, is he just laughing to humor his boss? Like it's that nervous type of laughing when boss makes a joke that's terrible and everybody has to fake laugh at it.
I mean, this scene is also a scene that feels straight out of American Psycho. Like it's identical to some of the things that happen.
It does feel like Peter like putting on a human skin and trying to act like a normal human.
Yeah.
But just being so unsettling and weird.
He has this idea of what he's supposed to be, but he doesn't know how to act like it.
He's like, I'm just one of the guys.
Yeah, this is where that accent's really thick too when he's talking to them.
It's just a running theme of like nobody in this movie acknowledges what he is aside from Alva.
Yeah.
And like his girlfriend, they're the chick that he dates a couple of times. Like everybody else enables this behavior pretty much nonstop. So
cocaine's a hell of a drug.
Which I think may have been an indictment on like society, allowing this type of thing without actually doing anything about it.
For sure. Yeah. It's kind of still relevant.
Yeah.
So definitely, yeah.
I'll talk about that later. But next, we see Peter arrive at home where he finds a note that Jackie left him, which she wrote on a napkin when he stood her up. He stares at the note, which just reads, "Stay out of my life," while he begins another epic psychotic fit. He rips up the note like a teenage girl who just got dumped in a prom dress hours before the big dance. And we cut back and forth between Alva heading home on the subway and Peter absolutely destroying his apartment with spastic rage. And it keeps showing Alva's purse because she mentions that she has a gun in her purse. Like I think that's when he chases her into the bathroom, she says it like I have a gun or whatever. So now they've set up this Chekhov's gun where there's a gun in the purse and the camera keeps focusing on the purse as she's riding home on the subway and there's a guy begging for money as he sings and stuff like that. So it's setting up this vulnerability that she has to go through every day of being on this, being exposed to psychos on the, on the subway.
If I had to take that train every day, I would probably have a gun myself. So I had a quick...
I think that's what one of the male employees says because they were like, she has a gun or something, and he's like, well, she takes the Pelham every night on the subway. Of course, she's got a gun.
I actually saw that the way that they described the trains wouldn't get her to the Bronx. So they screwed up that detail.
Oh, really?
Someone got fired over that blunder.
I did have a quick fact about this freak out in his apartment. Apparently, that was all actual like stuff. It wasn't like props or anything. Usually, when they do something like this, where they destroy an apartment, they get real glass out of there and not like plate glass. I mean, these could have killed somebody. Like if Nick Cage would have slipped and fallen on that table when he threw it up, he could have like actually killed himself. But they had a $2 million budget. This was apparently a non-union film, and the union was actually really pissed. The whatever SAG or whatever that Nick Cage was doing this movie and that they were making this movie without a union, and they actually protested during the movie. So like in the first scene when they're trying to hail a cab, there was actually a protest right off screen yelling at them, and they had to ADR their lines for that scene. So maybe
makes a lot of
cab
sense
driver's crazy gibberish in that scene. Yeah.
Maybe that was one of the people protesting. Maybe that's a line from them.
At a certain point, Peter smashes the bathroom mirror and screams, "What is happening to me?" and gets flashes of his vampire lover. We didn't talk about it, but previously he touches a mirror when he's still going through this like transformation, and he recoils from it like it burns him. He's like, which is not something that happens to vampires. I don't know why they put that in. Like you're supposed to not be in the mirror.
I think that happens a little later, right? That's when he's like doing his full-on crazy stare into the mirror.
Maybe. There's several parts where he looks into a mirror. There's one point when he can't see himself, but prior to that, he touches the mirror and he like recoils from it. But I can't remember.
Do you know what that actually is from? Why the mirror is a bad thing for vampires?
It has to do with the soul. They used to think that mirrors were the gateway to your soul, and since vampires don't have a soul, they don't have a reflection.
That's deeper
like that.
than I was saying, but silver.
That was the original Folkloid.
They're
okay.
So you can be killed by silver, and like mirrors used to be made out of silver, but now it doesn't make any sense. So like when you see a vampire movie set now, they're never looking into a silver mirror.
That would explain why when he touches he freaks out, because he still has that. Yeah, he still has that mindset of the olden vampire.
He's
watching
instead
of being like a sheet of foil, he thought it was silver. Yeah, which I guess makes sense for the character. He like half picks and chooses what what's happening to him based on what he's been exposed to. It's funny. That's funny. I haven't heard about that. Yeah, I'd always heard that it was like your mirror is your soul or whatever, and so vampires don't have one. That's just why they don't show up in a mirror.
Well, maybe that part, the non-reflection, but the reason they can't touch the mirror is silver.
That doesn't make sense for a later part of the movie, but I'll get to that when it happens. Back at the best therapist in the world's office, Peter explains that he had a difficult day the day before, and he tells her about how the missing contract is a huge deal to him, but not that big of a deal to anyone else on the planet, including the guy who asked for it. Peter is completely baffled by the idea that any contract could ever possibly go missing, and says that the contract should be there if it was filed correctly. He says, if you make a contract and you store a copy of it, it would be where the copy goes. Therapist agrees with Peter, who just got justification for his insanity from a therapist, who agreed with him without getting any details of the situation, justifiably says, yep. Again, this is where my theory that the therapist doesn't actually exist. She's a projection of his mind, making everything that he does okay, because she doesn't challenge him on anything. But it could also be an indictment against society, again, who allows therapists don't actually, the shitty therapists like this don't actually solve anything. They just enable the stuff to get worse.
I had one another little tidbit there. If you watch all of the therapist scenes, New York is blurry in the background in the very first shot, and by the end it's like it's in the room with them. It just keeps getting clearer and clearer and clearer, and the intention was that New York was kind of like a character in the movie, and that his insanity is tied to the insanity of the city, how the chaos of the city around him. So every time you see him in that therapist's office, it's with New York in the background, and New York gets clearer every single shot.
At one point it's like I didn't even think that the way the window looks out on a street, like going off in the distance, which means the building is either over the top of the street or this is not an actual view that the window has. I don't know how buildings are done in a lot of New York.
They said that it has a tendency to look like a rear projection in that scene. Even the director was like, it's so clear that you wouldn't think this is real, but it actually was an actual window facing out to the street.
It's a hell of a view.
It looked fake a couple times, and I was like, well, green screen wasn't really a thing back then. Blue screen was more of a thing back then, but they would do rear projection. They would have gone to the trouble
to do it for that.
Probably not
for that type of a shot, but again, that's me thinking modern filmmaking techniques where you can CGI anything behind anything. It looks seamless. So, it's funny. I didn't actually catch that, where it gets more and more clear as the movie goes on. The movie does open with all these establishing shots of the sun rising over the city. Like it's the city is the establishing shot for it, and then it sort of bookends with it in the
There's
third
a
act.
lot of that, showing the city when they're kind of like transitioning to different things to kind of show his insanity being reflected back into the city, or reflecting from the city back into him, or whatever.
The therapist then contradicts her previous statement to this unhinged schizoid by saying it's possible that the contract is misfiled. This, of course, doesn't sit right with him, and he demands to know who is the moron that could have possibly misfiled something when it couldn't be any easier. He then launches into one of the greatest Nicolas Cage movie moments of all time. He emphatically explains that since everything is alphabetical, it makes no sense that anyone could have ever misfiled anything ever. He drives home the point by losing his ever-loving mind while maniacally screaming his ABCs while waving his hands around and clapping in the doctor's face. Then he says, "I never misfiled anything," like a toddler explaining their side of the story during a tantrum. He even puts his hands on his hips and he goes, "I never misfiled anything, not once, not one time." His voice cracks and he freaks out. He actually launches into the whole ABCs, the whole A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P.
Him clapping like right into her face and like shaking his hands crazily. Like he really loses it.
Thrusting his hips at her.
That was apparently she didn't know what he was going to do in that scene. They didn't tell her. They wanted her to be completely surprised by whatever madness he threw out, and that's what Nick Cage came up with.
That was perfect because she looked genuinely surprised.
He wants to know who did misfile the contract, to which the doctor explains she can't possibly tell him, instead of calling someone to put a wacko in a straitjacket. Then she just lets him go about his day, leaving the rest of us to deal with him. Best therapist ever.
You know, now that you're saying it, like, it does kind of make sense that this is just him, like, giving himself therapy and, like, thinking through things in his head.
This scene is what did it, because I thought any real therapist could say, you know, the implication being, you did it, you filed it incorrectly, but she doesn't tell him that. Which, if she's a figment of his imagination, he's not getting that. Like, his mind doesn't allow him to see the fault that he caused. Yeah. It would make sense that the therapist in his mind is just sort of letting him rant, but not actually blaming him, assigning him any kind of blame. And that's where I sort of caught into that theory of like, maybe she doesn't actually exist, and he's just running these exercises out in his mind because he knows he should talk to a therapist about something, but he thinks he can do it better himself. Yeah. So he runs through these things in his head.
It makes a lot of sense, actually.
Because you never see her. There's one shot where you do see her with somebody else, but it's also, he's talking to her on the phone, and it could very well be him imagining what's happening to her. Right on cue, we see Peter back at his office wearing sunglasses, smoking a cigarette, and torturing the people who work for him. He blows smoke in a woman's face, chucks someone's rubber ducky into the garbage, and he snaps at Alva, who still hasn't found the Heatherton contract. This leads to the lady who just had a rubber duck tossed into the trash to say, he's so eccentric, which seems like a bit of an understatement.
I mean, seriously, just like picking up somebody's. Just imagine if you did that in a real office today. Like, you pick somebody's personal possession up off of their desk and throw it in the garbage can. Oh.
Have you guys heard the song "Excitable Boy" by Warren Zevon?
Possibly.
He's just an excitable boy. Well, the song "Excitable Boy" reminded me of this movie. Or this movie reminded me of that song. It's about a boy who everybody just says, oh, he's just an excitable boy, and it's just this fucking weird kid who does all kinds of weird shit, like biting the recess lady's tit and stuff, and everybody, it's a Warren Zevon song, so it's weird, but it's super upbeat, but it's like about super dark shit. So he's like, the whole chorus is, he's just an excitable boy, like everybody excuses him, and it turns out the guy takes this girl out to prom, and he rapes her, and he murders her, and then gets convicted of it, but because he's just an excitable boy, he only gets like 10 years in prison, and they let him out, and he goes back and he digs up her body and he makes a cage out of her bones, and like, he's just an excitable boy. Like, that's the whole song. It reminded me of that kind of reaction where he does all this insane shit and nobody calls him out on it, and everybody's he's so eccentric, you know. He's just eccentric. What are you gonna do? Peter's just gonna throw your shit in the trash. You just gotta live with it.
Yeah, you know, you gotta deal with this sometimes. It's New York.
Yeah. Alva gets called into Peter's office as everyone's leaving for the day, and he offers her a pistachio to make up for the whole bathroom chase thing.
I have a quick fact. I kind of struggled where to bring this up, but apparently the food that he eats throughout the film is actually intentional. So it's like, he starts with something really small, which is the pistachio, and then he eats a cockroach, then he eats a pigeon, then he chomps on a human. So it's like he's just building up to his final meal. Spoilers.
I see. Interesting. Then he says that he was on mescaline, which honestly would explain a lot of Peter's behavior throughout the film, but he of course isn't on mescaline, and he's instead covering for the fact that he's just literally insane by saying he's high at work all the time on a substance that's been illegal since the 70s because that makes it fine.
She agrees with him.
For a brief moment, I wanted that to be the actual explanation for it. Like, we just didn't know that he's just been
knows
doing
it could be. Like, it just you just don't see him do it the whole movie.
Alva surprisingly says she's also tried mescaline in high school, and the two of them have a good chuckle over it. That's hell of a thing.
He keeps having these moments where he like does something horrible to her, and then kind of like eases her back in, and then does something horrible to her, and then brings her back in.
They bond over mescaline.
Mescaline, you know, as you do.
Peter asks her why she has her coat on, nonchalantly and she explains it's quitting time, to which he says she can't leave until she finds the missing contract. She says that she's been looking through the files for days and her eyes are killing her, and Peter lets out a sarcastic, "Aw."
It's so good.
Alva asks if someone else could find the file, and Nicolas Cage stands up, takes off his sunglasses, and delivers a speech that has become a meme of legendary proportions. He makes the meme face, which you'll know what it is. I think there's a couple of Nicolas Cage meme faces, but you'll know which one it is.
Oh, wait, hold on. If you're watching this on video, right here.
Yeah, it's the one on the mug.
It's on my coffee cup.
Well, so imagine as he makes that face the whole time he delivers this monologue. He explains that Alva is the lowest person on the totem pole at the office and that he wouldn't force anyone else to do such a horrible task. He then cocks his head back and slowly opens his eyes wider than most would believe humanly possible while staring Alva down and grinning like a fucking maniac.
I have another quick fact on this. Is the inspiration for this was actually those old vampire movies where the vampire would stare at them menacingly.
He's trying to hypnotize her or intimidate her or whatever.
Yeah, the cabinet of
that's
Dr.
That's exactly what
There's
it
a
reminded
lot of
me
this. His posture. I don't know if his posture has started changing at this point
He's
in the movie,
starting to
but he
hunch
hunches
a
his
little
shoulders
bit.
up.
Yeah.
And that look, that's his vampire look, which he practices several times in the mirror and stuff.
What I love about it is it's less that he's being turned into a vampire that he thinks he is. It's more like he's being turned into Renfield from the original Dracula, the creepy little thrall of Dracula, which I believe was intentional, the way it's doing it. And it fits his character to completely miss the mark. Think he's the badass Nosferatu or Dracula, and instead he's just the little toady that's psycho that ends up in a mental institution. There's another part later that's a reference to that too, I think. He goes on to say that he takes joy from the fact that he's torturing her with finding the contract, and that she has to do it or he'll fire her. She's petrified by this fruitcake speech and slinks out of her psycho boss's office. Suddenly, Peter stands up and yells, "Don't you want to use your gun, Alva?" Which I'm like, was he trying to get her to shoot him?
I think so. Like he's trying to push her until she kills him, because apparently he doesn't want to kill himself, which he does later, sort of.
This is where you first get the hint that he's suicidal. It's not that because at this point he doesn't believe he's immortal yet. Like he just wants someone to off him. He can't to get out of the hell of his existence.
Which his life actually seems pretty great. I mean, he's constantly picking up women, and he's got a pretty decent place. He's got a good job. He seems to make good money. Highly educated.
But again, I think that's it's an indictment on the way society treats the mentally ill. Like they don't understand that you could have all of those things and still be depressed or be miserable or be schizophrenic or whatever. It doesn't care who you are or what kind of person, what kind of life you have. It can still take its toll.
Right.
Yeah, he's obviously schizophrenic. I mean,
and he can't form attachments with people and stuff. Like, like he wants more than anything to be in a loving relationship, and he can't. He's incapable of it, which drives him insane.
It turns out to be a pretty sad story.
Like he talks about the only thing he loves is torturing Alva.
Yeah.
She's weirdly enough, she's the one character he has the most connection with in the whole movie, and that's the kind of thing
that's his relationship with her. Is torture.
On the street, we see Peter with a melancholic look carrying groceries home with the traditional classic Hollywood. He's got a baguette sticking out of a brown grocery bag. Because how else would you know that somebody just bought groceries? He spots a neon cross on a church. He drops to his knees, spilling his food everywhere, and then he runs off into traffic before leaving all the food behind. He just does this dramatic, and just collapses, seeing a crucifix.
So there
was people run over to help him.
One thing I noticed about that is that's the last time he eats normal food, or even has any association with normal food, and I think it's because partially his transformation into insanity is spiral. Is because he's starving and he doesn't have any food in his system. Like he just won't eat anything
because he thinks he can't. I didn't realize that, but yeah, that's definitely, that had to have been the purpose of that scene, other than to show the crucifix and him freaking out by seeing it. I thought it was like, it's not as common in the US, but in like Europe, all the pharmacies have, green neon crosses or whatever. I thought that's what it was at first. Like, it wasn't even a church. It was just he just saw a cross outside of a pharmacy or something, which would have been even better. It just sees it outside of a Rite Aid and runs off. Next, we see Peter crawling on the floor of his destroyed apartment to answer a ringing phone. Rachel appears and throws him onto the bed and tells him to confess his love for her, and he obliges while staring cross-eyed at the ceiling.
In that scene, is it me or did it look like he had a full-on boner?
I thought you guys might bring that up because I had the same thing, but I didn't want to mention it without, like, I didn't want to be the one weird guy being like, you guys notice Nick Cage might have had a boner in that scene?
I didn't notice it, but now that you've said that, like, that 100% would be a thing Nick Cage would do, because he's thinking about Rachel.
Yeah.
And they would, let me get a stiff here and do the scene.
Yeah, it's pretty prominent in that shot. Like, when he first goes onto the bed, it's like straight up.
Yeah. And I was like, okay, well, I'll ask, but I'm gonna move on. So I'm not going back to check. I did a frame by frame analysis, guys, and yeah, that's a full on rager.
Put it in the nudity counter just as a side. After more passionate vampire love, Peter watches the legendary 1922 German silent film Nosferatu on TV. He stares at the TV, mumbling like a mental patient, while Rachel congratulates him for keeping their relationship a secret. Peter is like really starting to snap at this point. And this is where it's like he's just, he's watching this Nosferatu thing and he's just becoming a mindless
I think he's just
drone, like
absorbing what a vampire is supposed to be through watching these things on TV.
And I think from this point forward, he hunches his shoulders like Nosferatu does.
The Nosferatu look, and then when he has the teeth in, he starts doing the like hand thing that Nosferatu does all the time.
Which I found out Nosferatu was originally supposed to be about Dracula, but they couldn't secure the rights to it because Bram Stoker wouldn't sell it to some random German film company. So they made an original character, but the spirit of the movie is supposed to be that it's Dracula. The next morning, Peter's happily singing in the shower, and he lets an invisible Rachel join him. Yeah, it's where he's like, come in the shower, and there's literally nobody there.
Sure, so it's another one of those. Come right in.
You don't. Sure, you're right. It's where you get an actual glimpse of the real world and what's happening, not what's in his head.
Yeah.
We cut to Peter staring at himself in a mirror with a crazed look on his face. He tries to touch the reflection, pretends to burn his hand on the mirror before casually walking away, as if he'd been rehearsing for a play.
Yeah, I think that was when he was like rehearsing the look, the vampire look. And it was right after he had watched Nosferatu the night before, so that makes sense.
Yeah. In the kitchen, Peter spots a cockroach scurrying around on the stove. He does what anyone would do in that situation. He picks it up, studies it for a second, and scarfs it down, obviously hating every bite.
Can I hit you with a quick fact here?
Yeah.
So,
please.
This was all Nick Cage's idea. The director was like, originally they were supposed to eat a raw egg or something like that. He was going to like spill a raw egg out and eat it or something. And Nick was like, no, that doesn't drive home what's going on in this scene. And he did it on the first take, and the one that is in the movie is actually the first take, but the director made him do it 3 times. And they actually themselves discussed their differences that they had on set, like in the scene where he rips up the letter that he gets from Jackie. The director wanted him to like take a step back and like move over to one side or something like that, and Nick was like, I'm not going to do it. I'm standing completely still and I'm going to rip it up. And they fought for like 20 minutes on set, and like Nick finally got his way on it. And this was another thing, was like, I'm going to eat this fucking cockroach. And and the director was like, okay, then we're going to do multiple takes of this thing. The director said that they only did 2 takes, but everybody else has said that they did 3. So he had to eat 3 cockroaches. And he said every muscle in his body told him not to do it, but he did it anyway. And apparently it's become like a major thing because PETA of all people, went after him because he ate a fucking cockroach. And it's a cockroach. It's not like he's eating a mouse or eating a dog or something. He's eating a cockroach. And Nicolas Cage actually said, like, you know, if any of you can actually tell me that you've never used a can of Raid to kill cockroaches in your own house, then I will concede that you're totally right. But it's a cockroach. Who really cares? Yeah, I thought that was a fun little... Like,
That's so awesome.
He added it to the movie. That was not supposed to be in there.
Oh my god!
It's not quite on the level of like pink flamingos eating dog shit off the ground, like the John Waters movie with Divine eating dog shit, like actual dog shit off the ground. But it's still like, I think that's a good. That's a good show of the devotion to his character in this movie, his performance, especially if he's like all revolted by it, because that's
you
what
can tell he is
character would be doing.
Really disgusted by it when he's doing
He's
it.
like,
when he hits that first crunch, his face changes, and that is genuine. And then he turns off, and it looks like he's gonna puke. Because he like turns and
I'm sure he
the
spit
sink's
it out
behind him.
immediately.
Yeah. The sink's like right behind him, and they cut right after that. And I was
It's
like,
so good,
man,
though,
I think that
because
was legit.
it makes way more sense than a raw egg, and also again, it's like it's the Renfield thing. Like, he eats flies throughout Dracula and stuff, so he's eat living things, and all he can get are flies and mice and shit in his cell. So it is like that. He thinks he's turning into Dracula, but he's really just turning into Renfield.
Yeah.
Back at Peter's office, it's Friday, and Alva has decided to take herself a nice little 3-day weekend by calling out sick. I guess the crazed maniac speech from the night before didn't quite drive home the work ethic Peter was hoping to inspire in her. He needs to read some leadership books or something, you know?
1 minute manager. He needs some.
We see Alva at home with her mother, who is pushing her to go into work while she explains that she hates her boss and wants to quit, which if she had, this movie would have ended very differently. Peter whistles to himself at the office and tracks down Alva's address and decides to pop in on her to see how she's doing, like any concerned boss would do. Alva is busy ironing shirts in her bra in front of an open window when Peter knocks on the glass. She, of course, is shocked to see him, and also equally shocked to have someone see her in her underwear, despite being in full view, like just right in front of the window.
What are you doing here?
Shades uneven drawn.
Yeah.
Peter sweetly offers her some soup because he really cares about her. It's just like a packet of dehydrated soup. It's not even. It's like he took out of the work break room or something to bring it up. Somehow he talks her out of calling the cops by telling her he wanted to let her know how bad he felt for his unhinged, bulging eye speech from the previous night. She opens the door for this lunatic, where he explains that the most important thing to him is her health, and she admits that she didn't come into work because she was afraid to go to work without having found the contract. It's not an actual sick day.
Yeah.
Peter expresses remorse for his actions and tells her the contract isn't important anymore. He then offers to take her back to work in a cab, which she reluctantly agrees to. He opens the door of the cab for her and then immediately goes back into dick mode. Just like throughout the whole scene, it's so obviously a fake nicety that he's losing onto her, but she's so sweet that she believes it.
I love the look he gives her, like after he slams the door, and then he just kind of like saunters around the backside of the cab.
He says that he doesn't want any more tension and that she will one day be in his position because she's a very bright girl, which is how he knows that today, by God, is the day she's going to find that damned Heatherton contract. Alva realizes he was lying about the contract being no longer important, and Peter explains that the work's not just going to go away. It never just goes away. And then he screams,
The goddamn contract is somewhere in those goddamn fucking files!
and then retches like he just ate a cockroach or something. I don't get the point of him
Never
feeling
just
sick after.
goes away. His like retching, he does that so many times throughout the movie. Kind of becomes his thing after a while.
Yeah. Alva asks if he's all right, and he hits her with an amazing "Shut up, bitch," which is the only use of bitch in the movie, according to the curse tracker from him. For some reason, this all rubs Alva the wrong way, so she asks the cab driver to pull off at her brother's repair shop, which she calls a gas station for some reason. It's clearly not a gas station. There's no gas pumps, but she says, my brother works right at that gas station, which I thought was a lie. But turns out it's true.
Me too.
They just happened to be driving past her brother's gas station, where she tries to get some bullets for her gun from her brother. He tells her that he only has blanks. Everyone Alva comes in contact with in this movie, including her brother, is dismissive about her fears, and no one but her seems to see that Peter is an absolute deranged psychopath.
She's the only one who sees.
And she's like, he's like, you're not supposed to even have this gun. And she's like, what's the point of having the gun if I can't use it? Which is a valid concern. And he's like, you're just supposed to scare people with the blanks. Which again is not like you take a shot at somebody.
They're gonna know
and they don't get shot, and they're gonna be like, oh. Back in the car, Peter spots a photo of the cabbie and his wife, and Peter seems to be jealous of the man's life for a second, but then asks, where's that little cunt, when Alva takes too long.
That caught me off guard. I was like,
where's that little cunt?
He escalated this.
Finally, Alva hops in the car and they head to the office. Peter's pissed about how much a cab ride all the way to the frickin' Bronx costs and chucks the money at the driver, who has probably seen every kind of nutcase in existence.
He goes all the way out to the Bronx.
He takes it out. He said he spent $20. So he spent $20 going to her house, and then it's like 44 something to come back.
Oh, okay.
So I guess it would be $20 both ways, and then an extra $4 for sitting at the repair station or whatever. Yeah,
glad that
$45 in 1988 was $99.78 in today's money. So he spent $100 just to go harass Alva.
Pretty spendy cab drive all the way out there and back.
Yeah. I mean, you think that's what, 2, 3, 4 hours? I don't know how long travel is.
I mean, it's probably like an hour out, hour back, depending on traffic. But yeah.
And I think this was also a way to show. I know it's a little later on when he opens his wallet up, and like he's not actually as rich as he thinks he is, or he acts like he is.
He does. He like opens his wallet, and you only see that he has a couple bucks after he chucks the money at the guy.
And he freaks out about it, which is like, he's not. He's mid-level manager. He's not like CEO guy rolling in the dough.
Yeah. Act 3, the resolution.
All right, Act 3 starts with Alva back at her desk, again sifting through files to try and find those goddamn the Heatherton contract. Peter makes a ton of HR violations by creepily walking up behind her, putting his hand on her shoulder, and telling her that he just shelled out $50 to get her back to the office before pulling her ponytail and saying that she better make it worth it. I mean, even in 1988, I think you could get fired for that.
Yeah.
Next, we see Peter in the bathroom where he washes his face, then looks in the mirror to see that he no longer has a reflection. This, of course, is all in his head because we can see him in multiple mirrors in that bathroom, which is hilarious.
Yeah.
He freaks out and asks,
Oh God, where am I?
before someone yells from inside a nearby stall, "You're in the goddamn crapper and I'm trying to take a dump. Either shut up and leave the acting lessons for home or go back to the ladies' room." And I'm sure more than a few people have made that same comment while watching this movie. Shut up and leave the acting lessons at home.
Oh man.
Peter runs back to his office and tells his secretary to tell anyone who calls that he's out, and then makes a noise, shuts the blinds, and slumps in the corner, trying to rationalize his transformation into a vampire.
Tell anyone who calls I'm out. I'm in a meeting.
Are you all right, Mr. Lowe?
Tell him I'm in a meeting.
I love his whole performance in that little call. Just tell him I'm in a meeting. After most everyone is left for the day, Alva finally finds the goddamn contract and excitedly takes it to show Peter, who is slipping in and out of reality, being feasted on 1 second by Rachel, and then explaining to the cab driver and his wife from earlier that he hasn't found the right woman yet. Just completely out of his gourd at this point. He opens the door for Alva, who is excitedly holding a contract, and tells her it's too late. She asks why it's too late, and Nick Cage goes full-on bananas. He says, "Too late," in a sort of sing-song voice, while he flips his head from one shoulder to the other, just getting a little bit louder each time he says,
Too late, too late, too late, too late. It's too late, Alva.
This again puts Alva a little on edge. So she grabs her purse with the gun in it and runs like hell. Peter chases her down the hall and then down the stairs to the basement where Alva finally pulls the gun out on him. He eggs her on to kill him while telling her that he'll fire her if she doesn't. That was weird. I'll fire her if you don't kill me. She tells him not to rape her, and he says, "Rape you? I will."
Yeah, it's like, I love that. He's like, oh yeah, I should have said that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'll rape you.
Then he starts tongue in the air like Jack Nicholson from The Shining. She shoots at the floor, and Peter smacks himself in the face, telling her to shoot him. She keeps shooting at the floor, so he smacks her in the face and tells her she's fired. You're fired.
Wait, after he fired her, she's not an employee, so he can hit her.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. It's totally justified. Yeah. Then he rips open her blouse, and she passes out. Apparently passes out. He kisses her on the neck a bunch of times, and then she is suddenly replaced with a vision of Rachel, who's just laughing away at him in his crazy predicament that he's in now. He realizes what he's done, picks up the gun, puts it in his mouth, and pulls the trigger twice. This, of course, doesn't kill him because the gun only has blanks in it. But Peter takes this as concrete proof that he is, in fact, immortal now. Couple of quick fact here. I took this straight from IMDb, so I wouldn't mess anything up. The film portrays Peter shooting himself in the mouth, then remaining unharmed because the gun is loaded with blanks. However, this action would actually cause him severe injury or death, since a gun loaded with blanks will fire compressed gas with the force of a bullet, which is exactly what killed Brandon Lee.
Yep. Well, there was something lodged in the gun.
There was something that,
because of that compressed gas, it fired out like it would fire a bullet. It just he was close enough that it killed him. Yeah, I thought that too. I was like, I wouldn't even shoot a cap gun in my face because of the burns too, because there's real gunpowder in the blanks too. So
this wasn't actually a blank at all. This was actually an electronic device that just pops. That was in the thing, and Nick Cage apparently got really pissed at that too because it kept misfiring. So it would he'd pull the trigger and then it wouldn't fire until after it clicked and stuff. So so it wasn't foolproof, but that's the only way that you could get away with this. And I hope that nobody throughout the years ever decided to pull the trigger on a gun with blanks in it, because it's not going to be a good day after that. After not being able to end it all with the gun, Peter lets out a few boo-hoos, as you do, you know.
I love that. Again, with the subtitles. The subtitles list these lines as boo-hoo. Like, oh, boo-hoo. It just added some extra hilarity to... It sounds like he's like sobbing as a chicken would or something. I don't even... You just got to hear it.
Yeah, it's amazing.
But it just says boo-hoo in the subtitle.
Which is in the commentary, Nick Cage actually said, like, if you can make a line like boo-hoo feel legitimate, then you've done a really great job as an actor. He even laughed at the line being boo-hoo. Then he tries to wake up Alva so he can brag about being a vampire. It's not to like wake her up to see if she's okay or anything like that. It's, I'm a real life vampire. And then he yanks off her crucifix and runs out, which I thought was kind of interesting. Like, I mean, wouldn't his character arc at this point be like hurt by a cross of some sort?
I don't know what the point of that was, other than to, I don't like it. It seems like a continuity error because you think he would be burned or something grabbing the crucifix after he's realized he's a full-fledged vampire. And I don't think it comes up with anything, and it doesn't factor into the rest of the movie. Like, he grabs it, but he doesn't
you
use
never
it
see
again.
it again.
No, so I took it as like this is like the final piece. Like, okay, he's lost it. That's it. He's slipped into this this level of insanity to the point where he can't even keep straight what is real for vampires and what isn't real. And so that, him yanking that off of there just proves like, okay, without a doubt, he's fully lost his mind and he can't comprehend any sort of reality, whether it's the fictional one that he's been creating for himself or the reality that we all live in.
Yeah.
I like that.
It's a pretty good one, yeah. Like other people, like at certain points, people do the little like finger crucifix to him, and he like even tells people to do it at some point. And I always kind of wondered like why didn't the necklace come up where he like puts the cross up to himself or something? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know why he grabbed it, but that's as good an explanation as any.
Yeah.
He just doesn't even. He's so excited in the moment that he doesn't realize he can't touch it. Like he shouldn't be able to touch it.
I'm a real life vampire. Honest to God vampire.
Maybe he's trying to show his powers are so great that he can touch a crucifix without being hurt. But then later on, people just doing this. But then later on, people doing this causes him to recoil. So that's like either he did that and then regressed, or he just forgot that he did that.
Next, we see him running down the street yelling,
I'm a vampire! 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 I'm a vampire!
which is, I'm sure, probably nothing new for most New Yorkers, like seeing something like that. You probably see that every day.
From this point on, most people don't really react to anything he's doing.
I have a fun fact about that. None of those people were actors. Those are all just random people on the street. And he just went out and did crazy things, and they shot it with a long lens so that they could be way away from it and just see what people would do. So like every time you see him on the street from here on out interacting with people, they're just people on the street.
That's amazing.
That's awesome.
This movie is so much better than I even thought because of that. Like you said, with them making New York a character in this movie and how the insanity of New York is what creates him. Like that's such a perfect behind the scenes thing that wasn't even planned. Like it's perfect.
I mean, it's exactly what you would see. Like if you know, like I live near San Francisco and I see people just pooping on the fucking street all the time and peeing and stuff. And like people just don't even, it doesn't even register anymore. I mean, half the time people are like stepping over homeless people. So like a mental case just randomly, crazily running around. My brother saw a guy just like masturbating in the street, and like hundreds of people are going to work and they all just kind of like ignored this guy. So somebody running around asking you to kill them because they're a vampire, probably nothing new.
I just wonder though, there had to be somebody that's like, oh, hey, isn't that the guy from that Cher movie? What the fuck is he doing?
Probably not, because I think you, like Patrick said, you ignore crazy people like that. So they would just, you'd hear a guy yelling, you might go, what? No, okay, well, and just look away and not pay attention
he'd be all
and
over
not
TikTok.
even realize it was Nick Cage.
I ride the train all the time into the city and back, and like, you know, there are crazy people on that thing all the time, and they're like screaming at the top of their lungs, and everybody's just looking at their phone, got their headphones in, just trying not to get the attention of the crazy person that's walking around. So yeah, this isn't too far from the truth, unfortunately. And they actually mentioned in the commentary that this was a time when there were a bunch of asylums that were shut down in New York, and they just kind of let these people out and let them out on the street.
Reagan shut down the part of the administration thing was to shut down the social programs like all the asylums, and they just let everybody out. Which
so crazy people all over the place.
30 years later, we're in a homeless crisis because there's nowhere for people like that to go still.
Yeah.
So
he runs home and busts a bunch of more shit in his apartment, and then fashions his couch into a coffin, and then sleeps under it.
So good. It's so amazing.
I thought that was brilliant. I was like, holy shit. That's next level. I would have never even thought about doing that.
He just flips a black couch over, and then he has to like lift it up like a coffin thing.
It's like resting on a bunch of books and stuff.
Yeah,
so
with a line of pillows for him to lay down on
his hardwood floor.
That was great. That was a good little cheering on top.
I love this movie.
Yeah.
Peter sees another vision of Rachel, who tells him he needs to feed. Ooh, now it's gonna get scary.
Yeah. Which is what you said. Like he hasn't eaten anything for a couple of days.
Hasn't eaten anything since he spilled all his groceries on the ground. Yeah.
Since he ate that cockroach.
Alva apparently just got up and went home without telling anybody. Like after she was raped by her boss and beaten by her boss.
Yeah, and nobody responds to like 4 gunshots going off in the building because they're in the service hallway. But it is after hours, so maybe nobody was around.
And it was in the basement,
hear it.
so maybe it's kind of a high rise. There's not a lot of people in that area of the building. Yeah, you would expect there would be at least like a doorman or something.
Yeah, on
the first floor who probably would have heard it, right? But yeah,
I don't know. I mean, if they're down in like a basement or like a facility area, you probably wouldn't hear it from.
I didn't really get that it was a basement.
Level.
I thought it was just the emergency stairwell. Like it has a bunch of maintenance stuff in it. But
yeah, they go all the way down. Like he follows her all the way down those steps, and then she's kind of run out of room to run when she goes into the basement.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought she had got into like a maintenance area.
Yeah.
All right, good enough.
And it's all concrete, so I guess you probably wouldn't hear it. But we just see her crying in her room, refusing to come out when their mom keeps trying to get her to go to work or get out or whatever. I think it's Saturday at this point, so she wouldn't have to go to work.
Yeah. This would be Saturday.
We see Peter back at his place chomping on a pillow. Apparently practicing for his first victim. That was my thing. Even in the commentary, they were like, we just wanted to put something in here.
But I wanted to make a pillow biter joke.
The director actually made a pillow biter joke in the commentary. So
awesome.
I think it's just him psyching himself up to
I think so too,
somebody.
Yeah. Then you see him sticking his hand into the light to see if he gets burned. Checking to see if his teeth have come in, just really standard vampire shit we've all done, different times. Every time I turn into a vampire, I do that stuff. Next, Peter heads to a magic shop to buy some vampire teeth so he can finally eat something more sustainable than cockroaches, which have to be getting old at this point. He finds some realistic teeth, but they're $19.95. And he only has like $4 left in his wallet after that $50 cab ride.
But he also he had a couple of ATM cards in there and stuff. Like he's maxed out his credit cards.
That's one of my questions on the
place doesn't accept. Maybe it was the 80s. Maybe credit cards weren't as popular, and some random magic seller owner couldn't take credit cards. Yeah,
credit cards were. I mean, they were definitely around in the late 80s, but they weren't as easy to use as they are nowadays. And that big machine that went over it and did a
I could just see some random magic store owner not just taking cash, not having the infrastructure set up to run a MasterCard.
It's actually in my my Coppola questions of why couldn't he just stop at an ATM and get some money out? I guess he just he's full on crazy at this point. All he has in his wallet is a couple of bucks. But at the same time, he had the forethought to go to a magic shop to buy some fake teeth. He opts for the sensibly affordable, fake as hell plastic vampire teeth, which come in at a reasonable $3.50.
Cheapies? Cheapies or whatever he says.
He runs awkwardly into the night when he comes out of the magic shop. The way he scampers away is so funny. Then he rips open the bag with the teeth in it like an angry toddler on Christmas morning who was expecting something better. This isn't a bike. Rips it open. He pops the teeth in and decides to crawl on the ground to a phone booth where he calls his incredible psychiatrist.
Yeah, this was the part where I'm like, this movie just has completely gone full absurdity comedy. It's not even I don't know. It's like there's a little bit of menace in the beginning of the movie, because this guy's kind of weird and unhinged. But now it's at the point where it's just it's just ludicrous.
Look how
it's
wacky
embracing
this guy
it.
is.
Yeah, it's so funny.
I mean, it's also kind of sad at the same time because he's
but
he's
it's
having
also
this
like
mental breakdown, and
but it's
that's
less-
what a mental breakdown looks like.
Right,
Yeah.
but
You're
it's
doing
less
these
threatening
absurd
and more
things.
like
Right.
he just buys some Halloween teeth and that's what he's going to wear now and run around with
Right.
his teeth like sticking out of his mouth.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of what a dark comedy is. It's like,
Right.
Yeah.
you know, it blurs the line between drama and comedy. Like it's so sad, but
But it was like this
hilarious
scene
at the
was
same
for
time.
me was like the complete dive into that, you know,
Yeah.
that the movie just never lets up on from that point forward.
Yeah. Moving forward, it's just all comedy.
He asks his psychiatrist if he can make an appointment for sooner because he may or may not be having some issues at the moment. By the way, he says all of this mumbling through those ridiculous oversized plastic vampire teeth. His expert therapist, who can obviously tell Peter is going through something traumatic, decides to schedule their next meeting for Monday because she's got some young buck in a towel waiting for her.
Right. Yeah.
That was
She's
such
got
a
some
weird
guy
thing.
who's like 20 years younger than her.
Yeah.
That was, I can't see right now because Mama's getting plowed. But Monday morning.
I had this theory, like before actually listening to the director and all that stuff, that was actually, like you said, like a vision, and Peter was imagining Alva's brother for some reason in her apartment because that guy looks a lot like Alva's brother.
He does.
Yeah, he does.
But in the commentary, it was just like, I thought this would be a funny thing to like make her have a young guy that she's with.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
no
See, I thought it was
intentionality
like-
to it.
You know, if she doesn't exist and he's calling nothing on the phone, like that's in his mind, that's her like leaving him. Like even she's got a young lover, you know, she's
Yeah.
happy in some relationship and has completely abandoned him at this point.
Yeah, that would make sense.
That was
'cause
my
then,
thought
like,
for it.
she can't possibly understand what he's actually going through because
Right.
she also is one of those people on the street that he sees all the time that's in love and
Right.
in his big speech at
It
the
gets
end.
to be happy and you know has somebody or whatever. So that's how I saw it when I was watching it. Because everybody who's in a relationship he just hates. He gets upset about it. It freaks him out. So that's like her blowing him off for Monday instead of you know he's like sooner. I need to see you sooner. Like he just imagines she's just got some hot stud. She's going to spend time with her now and leave him to his fate.
Yeah.
And that was in his mind.
It's currently Saturday night, so this guy who is crying on the phone through vampire teeth, begging for his psychiatrist's help, has to wait until Monday morning to see anybody. Peter, immediately after this interaction that could have ended with her saying something to the effect of, I can't see you right now, but it sounds like you're going through something and I can talk to you on the phone, or I know somebody I can send you to. No, none of that happens. He immediately catches a probably filthy pigeon on the streets of New York and eats it raw. So just the levels of like her failure of this, you know, helping this guy, it just happens over and over and over again throughout this movie. Like she had an opportunity to stop a murder and she didn't.
Spoilers.
Spoilers, yeah. Quick, couple of quick facts here. During this scene, Peter Lowe catches a pigeon, and the pigeon was actually drugged so that Nicolas Cage could catch it.
I wondered about that. Because I'm like, you ever try to catch a pigeon? It's probably not. You can't even walk up to them. They'll run away or they'll fly or whatever. And I was like, even if you clip their wings, they can usually run faster than you can casually walk up to him like he did.
Nick Cage had no idea. Even up until the point of the commentary that pigeon was drugged. He thought he actually caught the pigeon.
He put that on his resume.
Maybe pigeon
picture.
The director was like, "No, we drugged that pigeon."
Maybe
like,
maybe PETA was onto something with the way this film crew. Like maybe PETA was onto something with the way this film crew handled animals. You know, like he just drugged a
I
pigeon.
might be on their side for once.
Peter heads to his bed, couch coffin, with a belly full of pigeon meat, and then heads to bed so that he can have a nice early evening the next evening and greet the next great adventure that's waiting for him the next night. When he wakes up, Peter heads out into the night in full vampire mode. Eyes agape, slumped shoulders, fake teeth and all. Peter heads to a nightclub where he pushes through the crowd and sucker punches the bouncer in the stomach. I have a big question about that for later.
Yeah. The bouncer's like, oh, he's a tough guy. Let him go.
Just let him go. It's fine. No way I can figure out who did that. Weirdest guy in the world with fucking vampire teeth.
He's all dancing in the club. Oh, he kind of looked like that guy, but I can't tell.
Can't be sure.
Can't be sure.
I know he had some fake vampire teeth in, but it might have been a different pair. He might have got the 1995 pair. I don't know. The club is a full-on smorgasbord of sexy lady necks. And in the cocaine glory days of the 80s, no one really seems to think twice about a guy wearing fake vampire teeth walking around with a demented look on his face the whole time. Probably wasn't even the weirdest person in that club that night.
Oh, 100% not. That's why people are like, oh man, this guy's really enjoying himself.
This guy's having a great time. He's a fun dude. Peter does his best Nosferatu impression as he slinks through the club until he finds the one lone cokehead off on her lonesome.
Which is the least believable part of this whole scene.
Yeah.
It's
There's just
everywhere except for that.
There's one attractive woman sitting by herself doing coke.
Yeah. Not going to happen. There's no way.
Yeah.
There would be 20 dudes trying to bang that girl.
Mm-hmm. There'd at least be people sitting in the other open booths, you know, just hanging out.
They have I found it super cute exchange between the two of them, where she makes fun of his goofy teeth and his like gestures and stuff.
She's coked out of her mind, so it's funny, and he's like, playing in on it.
And then he gets a little too handsy and tries to grab at her titties, which is not kosher in her book, even in her coke-addled mind.
Even coked out, yeah.
She gives him a few quick slaps before he takes a big old bite of cokehead neck. And at last, our vampire finally tastes human blood. He seems a little lachrymose about it when he like stands up and kind of like slinks away. It's sort of like, it's almost like reality hit him in that moment.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And he puts the teeth back in.
Yep,
showing that he took the teeth out
then,
to do it because he couldn't bite her with fake plasticky teeth. And he puts them back on to walk away.
Yeah, Sheena, my wife, had a bunch of issues with this of like, would he actually be able to kill this girl with these fake vampire teeth or even his own teeth? I mean, the idea I think is that he did puncture her artery. And she bled out.
There'd be way more blood if that was what had happened.
Oh, yeah. There would be.
Yeah, I thought she just passed out from fear or whatever.
Yeah.
Or maybe because I'd actually thought she'd like OD'd or something, like because she just took a hit of coke and this guy's attacking her and she had a heart attack or something and died from it.
Heart attack.
We did see that newspaper later on that says disco death, you know, that she died in a bizarre murder.
So maybe she had a heart attack.
She had bite marks on her neck. There's a weird vampire guy in the club. No correlation.
Yeah, there's all sorts of little questions there too. He slinks back into the club where all the other people are and has a nice good cough on some people's drinks.
Corona.
They get up and leave immediately, which, let's face it, that's what everybody would have done in that same situation. I feel like I've actually been in this exact same situation where I'm sitting at a table and somebody comes and coughs or does something weird or like, you know, is doing drugs or something,
like
and we all are like,
up.
okay, maybe we should leave. But, you know, this is actually like a really good way to get a table nowadays, if you think about it. Like going to a really busy bar and just cough right on their table. You get that table right away.
In the face.
Yeah.
Or to get jailed for 30 days.
Right. Yeah, that's true. He slumps down in a corner and Rachel appears. He's happy to see her, but she shuns him and calls him pathetic before spitting in his face and then revealing her new boy toy, Donald.
Again, mirroring what happens with the mimes earlier, where he slaps her and she spits at his face or whatever, or she slaps him, and there was that exchange again, which is why I was like, well, maybe that was just in his head.
Maybe. I mean,
That's how because like that's in his mind. That's how relationships end.
Which kind of how all of his relationships end in this movie. I mean, his relationship with Jackie ends through a note, but you know. Mm-hmm. Peter professes his love several times as Rachel walks away, leaving Peter to vomit cough violently, which is one of Peter's signature moves in this movie that I love.
Well, he did get bit by a bat. No, he didn't. No, he didn't. I forgot he didn't.
No, he didn't.
No. I was making a Corona joke.
He did eat a
pigeon.
He did eat a pigeon just right before that. And he probably has like a bunch of blood in his stomach right now, which is probably make you kind of sick. Next, we see Peter grab the real Rachel, who is dancing with her boyfriend in the club. She has barely any recollection of who Peter is. He, of course, is covered in blood and looking like a mental patient, so you can't really blame her. But this is apparently the real, actual Rachel, which, you know, led me to some questions of like, did he see her as he was coming into the club, or how did he even know she was there? That's a whole weird like kind of plot hole to me. I don't know. What are the odds that she would be dancing at that club at the same time, unless he's been stalking her this whole time? Peter gets into a tussle with Rachel's boyfriend and tries to see if Rachel has vampire teeth, which of course she doesn't. Then Peter screams, "You're breaking up with me after I sucked that broad bone dry," at the top of his lungs to a room full of people. So when they find that cokehead girl's body, it's going to be pretty easy to figure out who did it, right? Yeah, and they like that newspaper makes it seem like they have no clue of who did it.
That's one of my Coppola questions, because he's also his chest is covered in blood
everywhere, all over his face, all over his. Outside the club, everyone makes fun of the psychotic guy covered in blood, and he runs off into the night.
As one does.
Again, pretty easy to figure out who did this.
Right.
Now, also, there's a person there who knows him, who he had a tussle with, who may or may not have actually been there. I've wondered about that, of like, maybe she wasn't actually there and he was just crazy screaming in the middle of this nightclub.
Mm-hmm. That would make sense.
Peter begins ranting to himself, and he reveals that Rachel was a girl that he knew in high school that he was apparently in love with. It was I saw it in the subtitles. He's like, "It's just a girl from high school. She means nothing. I never even loved her in the first place."
Oh, I missed it.
When he is walking out of the alleyway and then he sees the sun, that's what he's saying to himself when he comes out there. Which, up until just my final viewing, I had no idea who Rachel was and what connection she had, because obviously she's not real in the scenes that she's in. I thought maybe she was real in that first scene when he picks her up at the bar, but even that apparently is not, she wasn't actually there. She was never there. He created this entire fantasy because of the bat that turned him on. He created her. This vision of this girl he knew in high school to be a vampire. So it's all sorts of, there's a lot of layers of insanity here. He walks out of the shadows and into the rising sun, which really sets him off, and he runs towards it in an attempt to end it all finally. Alva, on the other hand, lets her brother in on the fact that she was beaten by her boss and that he kind of sort of raped her, which he's not a big fan of, as you would assume. He decides to head to Peter's house to tell him a thing or two, and in the meantime, Peter has gone into full-on mental collapse. He pulls a wooden board off of a pallet on the street and starts asking random people to kill him, asking random people to put their fingers into a cross, screaming at church bells.
So were those random people as well? Were those not extras?
Yeah, those are random people. The guy even says, like, "I don't speak English," when he like approaches him.
Yeah, when he tried to go into the church. Yeah. He's just harassing people trying to go to church.
I pulled the thing from IMDb, the IMDb Trivia. That's where I steal a lot of these quick facts. The shot of Lowe walking down the street at the end, clearly mad and talking to himself, were filmed with a long lens from a distance. The people walking past him are actual folks unaware that the movie is being filmed. For example, the couple that Lowe says, "I'm a vampire, kill me, who, while holding a stake, are not actors, but real pedestrians passing by who had no idea they're in a scene.
And he's covered in blood, too.
And their reactions are genuine, where they just kind of like run around him. Have you ever watched that show Billy on the Street?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I feel like that shows what New York's really like. Like, he's just running up to people, putting a microphone in their face, and like half the time they just run from him. They're just terrified. Peter then drags his wooden stake behind him for a while, covered in blood, while wailing at the sky with his eyes closed, walking into oncoming traffic. Again, pretty standard New York behavior. Then he walks face first into a wall and begins having an imaginary conversation with his all-star psychiatrist. He explains to his phantom therapist that he thinks her profession is entirely bogus, which is pretty goddamn true, at least of her.
Mm-hmm. That's the most sane thing he has to say at the time.
He tells her that he thinks the answer to all of his problems is love. This is all intercut, by the way, between put together normalish Peter from the very beginning in his first scene in the psychiatrist's office to lunatic covered in blood talking to himself Peter on the street. Also, he's holding that wooden stake in both his delusion and in real life throughout this entire exchange. He goes on to explain that seeing everyone else in love while he's constantly alone is torture, which Nick Cage actually said that that's his interpretation of the movie, is that loneliness drove him insane. Mm-hmm. And that he can't find anybody who lives up to his standards. You know, that's why he ditches that girl at the art gallery, even though she seemed like a good girl and like clearly into the same weird crap that he's into. And
she too was turned on by that bat. Should have been a perfect match.
If she would have been in there, she would have been turned on.
She
by
was
that
having
bat.
a blast with it. She was like, they went out afterwards again and had more fun.
Yeah. The therapist laughs at him because one of her other patients named Sharon is a perfect fit for him, coincidentally. Sharon, who is the next patient after Peter, apparently, comes in and is, of course, everything Peter's ever wanted in a woman. She loves horseback riding, poetry, Vivaldi, and long weekends in the country, which are all of this maniac's favorite things to do. Peter decides life will be perfect from now on and begins to leave the imaginary doctor's office with his new love before deciding that he should probably come clean about a few things. He admits to raping Alva and killing the girl in the nightclub, which is all hunky-dory in the doctor's mind. That is in his head, of course. She tells him to just get on with his big romance with Sharon and forget about such trivial details like the police and the whole being a vampire thing.
She says, I'll take care of it, or something. She's like, I'll take care of it, or something like that.
Yeah, she'll take care of the police. You just get on with your love life with this imaginary girl. At this point, I wonder if this is exactly how the interaction between him and his actual therapist would have gone, because she was terrible at her job before. Like, if he said that he raped and killed people, she'd be like, and then suck on her pin for a minute and be like,
see, this is
we'll see you next week.
I thought the movie was making an obvious, like, she's never been real. Like, this is the twist at the end, is that he's been having these conversations every time with the therapist where it's just him talking to her, trying to solve his problems. And this is like, she finally solves his problem where he realizes that he just wants love, and that because of that, she creates this perfect woman for him. In his mind, he creates a perfect woman for him to date or whatever. And now everything's going to be good. Yeah. Like, everything's going to have to worry about it. I don't need the psychiatrist anymore. Like, that's what I thought it was going with it.
I think you might be right. I mean, that actually feels, like, why would this dude who thinks he's perfect go to a therapist?
Right.
From the very get-go, the very first shot of the movie, basically, where he's in that office, is a delusion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's what I figured. And this was finally that twist there right at the end where it clicks. Like, he's always been talking to his mind, his version of what a psychiatrist would tell him, which is not actually helping him at all, and then absolving him of everything at the end. And that's the payoff.
Makes sense. He has a great conversation with himself all the way home, while everyone around him does their best to ignore him. Again, these are all just people on the street. He's just incredible, having this crazy conversation.
Dragging a plank with blood all over his chest.
I kind of feel like that maybe that was the whole inspiration of this film is like, the writer saw one of these crazy people on the street and he was like, I wonder what their story is. And then he started writing it and came up with this whole thing of like, well, he could be a normal person. And
just saw some guy screaming he's a vampire as he walked down the sidewalk. And what if that guy thinks he's a vampire? There you go.
He tells Sharon that he turned into a vampire last week, as you do, but that's all in the past now. But apparently, imaginary Sharon wanted more details, and Peter starts freaking the fuck out again.
Sharon. God damn it! What did I just say?
Alva and her brother are waiting outside of Peter's place when he makes his way up his steps, chit-chatting and screaming at the top of his lungs at his new imaginary girlfriend, still carrying his little vampire stake all the way up to his apartment. Like, if he's dropped the whole thing about being a vampire, why does he still have the stake? Alva's brother heads in after him with a tire iron, breaks into the apartment building. As Peter continues his argument inside his destroyed apartment, which is a really fun scene of like watching him interact with his crazy conversation he's having with Sharon. Peter and Sharon's argument gets pretty heated. He calls her a fucking pig before dry heaving again and then scampering under his makeshift coffin couch thing.
Like a cockroach.
Alva's brother breaks in and throws open the coffin couch, and Peter grabs his wooden stake. He places it over his heart and begs Alva's brother to kill him. With like very little hesitation, Alva's brother just pushes the stake in, and in one last scream, our hero is released from this mortal coil at long last. The end.
He gets one final vision of Rachel.
At all.
And he gets one final vision of Rachel over the credits, saying like, dream of me or something. Dream of me.
Dream of me, baby, or whatever.
As he's dying.
Curtains. Credits. That's it. What a
wild ride.
Amazing ride that one is.